Some salient features of Buddhism. The foundations of Buddhism are the Four Noble Truths, namely, suffering, the reason for being of Buddhism, its cause, that is craving, its end, that is Nibbana, the highest good of Buddhism, and the middle way. What is the noble truth of suffering? Birth is suffering. Old age is suffering. Disease is suffering. Death is suffering. To be united with the unpleasant is suffering. To be separated from the pleasant is suffering. Not to receive what one craves for is suffering. And the five aggregates of attachment are suffering. What is the noble truth of the cause of suffering? It is the craving which leads from rebirth to rebirth, accompanied by lust of passion, which delights now here, now there. It is the craving for sensual pleasures, kamma tanha, for existence, bhava tanha, and for annihilation, vibhava tanha. What is the noble truth of the annihilation of suffering? It is the remainderlessness, total annihilation of this very craving, the forsaking of it, the breaking loose, fleeing, deliverance from it. What is the noble truth of the path leading to the annihilation of suffering? It is the noble eightfold path, which consists of right understanding, right thoughts, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right endeavor, right mindfulness, and right concentration, whether the Buddhas arise or not. These four truths exist in the universe. The Buddhas only reveal these truths, which lay hidden in the dark abyss of time. Scientifically interpreted, the Dhamma may be called the law of cause and effect. These two embrace the entire body of the Buddha's teachings. The first three represent the philosophy of Buddhism. The fourth represents the ethics of Buddhism. Based on that philosophy, all these four truths are dependent on this body itself. The Buddha states, in this very 1 fathom long body, along with perceptions and thoughts, do I proclaim the world, the origin of the world, the end of the world, and the path leading to the end of the world. Here, the term world is applied to suffering. Buddhism rests on the pivot of sorrow, but it does not thereby follow that Buddhism is pessimistic. It is neither totally pessimistic nor totally optimistic, but, on the contrary, it teaches a truth that lies midway between them. One would be justified in calling the Buddha a pessimist if he had only enunciated the truth of suffering, without suggesting a means to put an end to it. The Buddha perceived the universality of sorrow, and did prescribe a panacea for this universal sickness of humanity. The highest conceivable happiness according to the Buddha is Nibbana, which is the total extinction of suffering. The author of the article on pessimism in the Encyclopaedia Britannica writes, "Pessimism denotes an attitude of hopelessness towards life, a vague general opinion that pain and evil predominate in human affairs, the original doctrine of the Buddha, is in fact as optimistic as any optimism of the West. To call it pessimism is merely to apply to it a characteristically Western principle, to which happiness is impossible without personality. The true Buddhist looks forward with enthusiasm to absorption into eternal bliss. Ordinarily, the enjoyment of sensual pleasures is the highest and only happiness of the average man. There is no doubt a kind of momentary happiness in the anticipation, gratification, and retrospection of such fleeting material pleasures, but they are elusive and temporary. According to the Buddha, non-attachment is the greater bliss. The Buddha does not expect his followers to be constantly pondering on suffering and lead a miserable, unhappy life. He exhorts them to be always happy and cheerful, for zest piti is one of the factors of enlightenment. Real happiness is found within and is not to be defined in terms of wealth, children, honors, or invasions. If such possessions are misdirected, forcibly or unjustly obtained, misappropriated, or even viewed with attachment, they will be a source of pain and sorrow to the possessors. Instead of trying to rationalize suffering, Buddhism takes suffering for granted and seeks the cause to eradicate it. Suffering exists as long as there is craving. It can only be annihilated by treading the Noble Eightfold Path and attaining the supreme bliss of Nibbana. These four truths can be verified by experience. Hence, the Buddha Dhamma is not based on the fear of the unknown, but is founded on the bedrock of facts, which can be tested by ourselves and verified by experience. Buddhism is, therefore, rational and intensely practical. Such a rational and practical system cannot contain mysteries or esoteric doctrines. Blind faith, therefore, is foreign to Buddhism. Where there is no blind faith, there cannot be any coercion or persecution or fanaticism. To the unique credit of Buddhism, it must be said that throughout its peaceful march of 2,500 years, no drop of blood was shed in the name of the Buddha. No mighty monarch wielded his powerful sword to propagate the Dhamma, and no conversion was made either by force or by repulsive methods. Yet, the Buddha was the first and the greatest missionary that lived on earth. Aldous Huxley writes, "Alone of all the great world religions, Buddhism made its way, without persecution, censorship, or inquisition." Lord Russell remarks, "Of the great religions of history, I prefer Buddhism, especially in its earliest form, because it has had the smallest element of persecution. In the name of Buddhism, no altar was reddened with the blood of a Hypatia. No Bruno was burnt alive. Buddhism appeals more to the intellect than to the emotion. It is concerned more with the character of the devotees than with their numerical strength." On an occasion, Sihar, a follower of Nigantha Nāda, approached the Buddha and was so pleased with the Buddha's exposition of the Dhamma that he instantly expressed his desire to become a follower of the Buddha. But the Buddha cautioned him, saying, Of a verity, O householder, make a thorough investigation. It is well for a distinguished man like you to first make a thorough investigation. Sihar, who was overjoyed at this unexpected remark of the Buddha, said, Lord, had I been a follower of another religion, its adherents would have taken me round the streets in a procession proclaiming that such and such a millionaire had renounced his former faith and embraced theirs. But, Lord, your reverence advises me to investigate further. The more pleased am I with this remark of yours. For the second time, Lord, I seek refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. Buddhism is saturated with the spirit of free inquiry and complete tolerance. It is the teaching of the open mind and the sympathetic heart, which, lighting and warming the whole universe with its twin rays of wisdom and compassion, sheds its genial glow on every being struggling in the ocean of birth and death. The Buddha was so tolerant that he did not even exercise his power to give commandments to his lay followers. Instead of using the imperative, he said, "It behoves you to do this. It behoves you not to do this." He commands not but does exhort. This tolerance the Buddha extended to men, women, and all living beings. It was the Buddha who first attempted to abolish slavery and vehemently protested against the degrading caste system, which was firmly rooted in the soil of India. In the word of the Buddha, it is not by mere birth one becomes an outcast or a noble, but by one's actions. Caste or color does not preclude one from becoming a Buddhist or from entering the order. Fishermen, scavengers, courtesans, together with warriors and Brahmins, were freely admitted to the order and enjoyed equal privileges and were also given positions of rank. Pāli, the barber for instance, was made in preference to all others. The chief in matters pertaining to Vinaya, discipline. The timid Sunita, the scavenger, who was admitted by the Buddha himself into the order and attained arahantship. Angulimala, the robber and criminal, was converted to a compassionate saint. The fierce Alavaka sought refuge in the Buddha and became a saint. The courtesan Pāli entered the order and attained arahantship. Such instances could easily be multiplied from the Tipitaka to show that the portals of Buddhism were wide open to all, irrespective of caste, color, or rank. It was also the Buddha who raised the status of downtrodden women, and not only brought them to a realization of their importance to society, but also founded the first celibate religious order for women, with rules and regulations. The Buddha did not humiliate women, but only regarded them as feeble by nature. He saw the innate good of both men and women, and assigned to them their due places in his teaching. Sex is no barrier to attaining sainthood. Sometimes the Pāli term used to denote women is Majjhima, which means mother folk, or society of mothers. As a mother, woman holds an honorable place in Buddhism. Even the wife is regarded as the best friend, Paramasaka, of the husband. Hasty critics are only making ex parte statements when they reproach Buddhism with being inimical to women. Although at first, the Buddha refused to admit women into the order on reasonable grounds, yet later, he yielded to the entreaties of his foster mother, Pājapati Gautami, and founded the Bhikkhuni order. Just as the Arahants, Sariputta and Moggallana, were made the two chief disciples in the order of monks, even so he appointed Arahants, Kamma and Uppalavana, as the two chief female disciples. Many other female disciples too were named by the Buddha himself as his distinguished and pious followers. On one occasion, the Buddha said to King Kosala, who was displeased on hearing that a daughter was born to him, "A woman child, O Lord of men, may prove even a better offspring than a male." Many women, who otherwise would have fallen into oblivion, distinguished themselves in various ways and gained their emancipation by following the Dhamma and entering the order. In this new order, which later proved to be a great blessing to many women, queens, princesses, daughters of noble families, widows, bereaved mothers, destitute women, pitiable courtesans, all, despite their caste or rank, met on a common platform, enjoyed perfect consolation and peace, and breathed that free atmosphere which is denied to those cloistered in cottages and palatial mansions. It was also the Buddha who banned the sacrifice of poor beasts and admonished his followers to extend their loving kindness metta to all living beings, even to the tiniest creature that crawls at one's feet. No man has the power or the right to destroy the life of another, as life is precious to all. A genuine Buddhist would exercise this loving kindness towards every living being and identify himself with all, making no distinction whatsoever with regard to caste, color, or sex. It is this Buddhist metta that attempts to break all the barriers which separate one from another. There is no reason to keep aloof from others, merely because they belong to another persuasion or another nationality. In that noble toleration edict, which is based on Chula Viyuha and Maha Viyuha suttas, King Asokar says, "Concourse alone is best." That is, all should hearken willingly to the doctrine professed by others. Buddhism is not confined to any country or any particular nation. It is universal. It is not nationalism, which, in other words, is another form of caste system, founded on a wider basis. Buddhism, if it be permitted to say so, is supranationalism. To a Buddhist, there is no far or near, no enemy or foreigner, no renegade or untouchable. Since universal love realized through understanding has established the brotherhood of all living beings, a real Buddhist is a citizen of the world. He regards the whole world as his motherland, and all as his brothers and sisters. Buddhism is, therefore, unique, mainly owing to its tolerance, non-aggressiveness, rationality, practicability, efficacy, and universality. It is the noblest of all unifying influences, and the only lever that can uplift the world. These are some of the salient features of Buddhism, and amongst some of the fundamental doctrines may be said: Kamma, or the law of moral causation, the doctrine of rebirth, Anatta, and Nibbana,